Well, this is just greetings to whoever's online. During this session, there's going to be some breakout periods, at which point the questions that we'll be talking about will be on your screen. And I encourage you to follow along and to struggle and answer those questions at home. We'll start the class shortly. Thanks. Okay. We'll begin, and people can, as they come in, can just join into the discussion. Couple logistical things. First thing is that there is going to be time to share and talk at the tables. So when we get to that point, if you're at a table where there's only one of you, I encourage you to join another table and join the conversation. This class came about 6 months ago, and when Karen and I first joined the church last fall, we started attending the adult education classes here. And towards the end, or in that process, I would always chat with Marco, either before or after the class a little bit, because we always sat over there. And then about 2 months after being here, Marco comes up to me and invites me to be on the adult education committee. And my response to Marco was, the one you should really ask is my wife, Karen, because she's been an educator. She's a professional educator and a classroom teacher, being a professional development trader, been in schools and universities her entire career. And so what was Marco's response? Great, the both of you can be on. So that should have told me something right away when how quickly things happen around here. And I was sitting in an adult education class in the spring, and it was at an end of one of the sessions, and it was kind of a summary of a lot of what is kind of going on in our political world and our just in society itself, around the growth of influence of white Christian nationalism, the continued struggle with dealing with discrimination of minorities, the demonization of immigrants, all the things that we've been kind of hearing with. And one of the members in the class just talked about how frustrated he was and how depressed it made him, and he wasn't quite sure what to do about it. And in that moment, it popped in my head, I wonder what James would have to say about this. And it wasn't 2 days later when I emailed Pastor Parks about this question. Well, within 2 days, Pastor Parks says, sounds like a great topic, Phil. We'll put it on the calendar and you can do it. So that was in last spring. And so that leads us to today. Now, the question that some of you might ask is, who am I? Since I'm so pretty new to the community, just kind of learning my ropes and way around here, and I think it's only fair that you kind of understand a little bit of my background and where I'm coming from as we move forward into the next today and the next 2 Sundays, and we work through James. So just a real brief background is that for the past 40 years, I retired in 2020, January 1st, 2020, right before 3 months before the shutdown. I had no inclination that was going to happen. It just was just the time of when I was called to retire. But I was a executive of nonprofit human service organizations for 40 years. And 2 of those organizations you might be familiar with. One of them is a Boys and Girls Club. It wasn't here, though, in Everett. It was in Corvallis, Oregon. The last one you are familiar with because you're actually supporting of them, and that's Volunteers of America, Western Washington, in which I was the president CEO for the last 11 years of my career. So it's from that perspective of working in the field as in that role that has shaped my experience and learning. In my last role at Volunteers of America, I was a commissioned minister in their organization, which is just a part of the functions of your responsibility as an executive, and because they're an ecumenical ministry instead of an evangelical ministry. But in that role, it did afford me the opportunity to go and study at Duke School of Divinity, and where I kind of got some more formal tasting of theology, which kind of perked my interest. And then when I retired and I didn't have to worry about those day-to-day duties of work, it afforded me the opportunity to audit classes, which I encourage anybody to look into at Regent College which is a theological seminary in Vancouver, British Columbia. And those were classes that are online, and anybody can sign up for them, but they're master levels of theological classes. And it was really a gift to do that through the closed down. You could still go online and do the classes. And one of the classes I took was on James, which triggered the question for me in my mind when the gentleman said, I'm frustrated and depressed, don't know what to do. I'm like, I wonder what James would say, which leads us to today. So today, there's really two major outcomes that I'm hoping to trigger in the conversation. One of this notion about what does it mean to be perfect, complete, whole, lacking in nothing. Those are phrases that get used in James and by Jesus in the Gospels. And so I want to kind of delve into that a little bit, reflect on it. And the other thing that James talks a lot about is what are the rules of trials of being tested, and what does that mean? And then perseverance or patience, and then wisdom. Those are all three key components that James starts his letter out with. And so I kind of want to visit and us to churn on this. Now, the real beauty of classes like this is that we all have different learning styles and different ways, things we hear and what they connect with to us, what they mean to us. So that's where I think it's a gift to one another to kind of share your thinkings and your wisdom with each other, because there's not one response to James. Everybody will have their own response based on your own life, your own circumstances, and your own understanding. So what the intent of the day's class is just kind of spark that in you to trigger your own internal work and thinking about what wisdom is James speaking to me on. So quick background. Now, I'm not going to spend much time. On your table are there's a blue, a yellow, and a white sheet. And I'm not going to review those. You can take and go over. Just a brief statement. The blue one is a little more narrative about the background and history of James. The yellow one is what Martin Luther had to say about James. And as some of you might know, he had a lot to say about James. And there's a lot of research into it and a lot of different opinions about it. So I'm not going to share your mind. That's just some quotes taken out of one of his sermons. There are two articles, copies of articles up here, that if you are interested in that afterwards, you can go find out what other people said about what Martin Luther said about James. So that's there. The white sheet, though, I found a great resource, because one of the things that Martin Luther does criticize James on is it's not teaching what one might call the passion of Christ, the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. But he is speaking to wisdom that Jesus taught all through the Gospels. And so that white sheet is a reference between what James speaks about and then how it references into Matthew and some points in Luke as well. So again, those are just your own reference materials and background, and you can choose to deal with them as you want. Okay, a quick setting of the environment James was written into and why I think it's kind of appropriate for today. It was written to Jewish Christians. So these are the first Christians in Jerusalem, but they were being dispersed. They were leaving, they were moving, they were dispersing. So this is a general epistle, a letter being written for all the Christians. It's not to one church. It's not to the Jewish church. It's for all churches, no matter where they're dispersed to. There was confusion being caused by false teaching regarding Paul's being saved by grace alone, which is in Romans. And if you see on the history a little bit, that timeline where Paul wrote Romans, and Common Era 56, 57, James was written right after that time, right in that time. So this is the window of what Paul's doing in Rome, is teaching and writing about. And so now the word's out on the street that you're saved by faith alone. Well, we'll get into that a little bit, but that's the situation that James is in and now is confronting in Jerusalem and with his members in his congregations. So it's that confusion. At the same time, in Jerusalem, Jews were actively persecuting the newly converted Jewish Christians for not obeying the Jewish law. So they were being really confused about, well, what do we do? Paul says we're saved by faith alone, so that means we don't have to do any of the law. And then Jews are actually taken before council because they're not doing the law. And, oh, by the way, persecution in Rome is now starting to trigger. In fact, we'll talk a little bit about that. And so people were fleeing Jerusalem, the Christians. And so the word was spreading, both because of the work that the other apostles were doing, but also because of the political dynamics that were happening in Jerusalem. So my question, does this sound like what we see on our nightly news and to some degree experience ourselves? We're just caught in this vortex of, oh my goodness, false teachers leading people to Christian nationalism, and they're calling themselves Christian, and we're sitting here like, whoa, what's going on? Oh, and then the encouragement of violence for those that are vulnerable and we don't accept. And we don't necessarily maybe on a daily basis see that, but the subtle things about and the influence of that kind of sometimes resonate around us that we might not be sensitive to. So these are the ongoing challenges for us. And this is exactly what James is speaking into. James is writing this letter essentially to us today. So now, back to the question of what do you think when somebody says to be present? So what pops into somebody's mind? I'm now going to let physically there. All right. So those three, you described kind of elements of your being. What does it look like when somebody's not here? They're present, but they're not emotionally or mentally here.
They're not engaged in listening or participating or thinking about it. Right? They're just there.
Yes.
Like a chair.
Like a chair. Right.
They may be focused on the future, what's going to happen next
True.
Tuesday.
Right. And so they're thinking past you. Yeah. So that's the scripture. That's James written, right? So that notion of presence is a form of doing, but also, or the physical presence is a form of doing, but also the mental presence is also a form of doing, as well as use the word emotional, but also your affection or your commitment to the being present is also there, is doing as well. So in that sense, those all become a part of the same act. So any other comments or reflections about that question about being present? So here's the first English challenge for us, is that this is a Greek word, and any Greek scholars in here, help me pronounce this, all attempt it. Teleos. This is a word that's used by Jesus a lot. And it's a word used in James. We, in English, use the word perfect. Sometimes it's described as lacking in nothing. Sometimes it's described as being complete or mature. But the word captures them all. It's not separate things. So that's the kind of the first learning for me as going into James, as we read through James, that the depth in which James talks, it's not a simple an action of being physically present, but it encapsulates all of those things that we just talked about. That's the completeness of it. That's the being lacking in nothing of it. That's the maturing of it. That's being the perfect, what we would say is perfect. So this might be this might be a test. So where in what gospel have we heard something similar to this? For those with Men in Mission, I saw, yes, right. So it's Mark 12, verse 29 through 31. He goes, when asked by a scribe, what's the first commandment? Jesus responds, you shall love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind and with all your strength. So that's the summary of teleos. So again, as we go into James, and then he adds, you should love your neighbor as yourself, which is then encapsulating what the first command is. So again, it gets to this issue of being teleos, being whole, complete. So when we look through James, that's going to be my struggle to try to capture all those three in me. So, in order to help us do this, the other last one is what also caught my attention. To act with integrity and without hypocrisy. So the integrity is what's within me. So if I'm doing something out of alignment with what's in me, then even though somebody external to me might think it's a good deed, that's a question. Because if I'm not doing it from my heart with a commitment to what's going on, I'm just doing it because I need to do it and get it out of the way. That then becomes a question for me. That's a question you have to ask yourself. So that's the challenge, right? I mean, James is speaking to each of us. So that's the question. Yeah, and we're going to talk through that. But again, this is so the point in this exchange is the issue that each of us have to get to struggle with this. It's not a how-to book. It's a think about these things and use your reasoning in your mind. So this is a model of how I'd like to move through James. So today we're only going to do James chapter 1. And it's going to be to ask these three questions as we read through James. What does James want us to know? That's using our mind, the reasoning. How does James wants us to be? In essence, that's the presence of our affection and our commitment to whatever the issue is. And then what does James want us to do? That is the physical action of it. And so as we read through the wisdom of James, we want to try to distinguish or hear the wisdom James is telling us about each of these questions, which does get to doing, but it also looks inside your own reasoning, because he also talks then about wisdom and the importance of wisdom and how generous God is in that. So it's the combination of one's own engagement in God's will that James is speaking to. So now we're going to get right to this, because I'm going to try to model this, and before I'm going to go on, and then I'm going to give you the opportunity as a group to model it. So I'll have Karen come up and read James verses 1 through 8.
And you'll see that it's reason for modern English. Very well solid. Okay. You need me? Or do I need me?
Yeah.
I need that. Okay. James 1, chapter 1, verse 1. James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus, to the 12 tribes scattered among the nations, greeting. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all things.
That's it. Okay, as you can see, James can really pack a lot of stuff in a really short period. So this will be a struggle for us to go through the entire letter of James that deep. So my intent is to give you a way, a mental model in which you, as you do your own study and reflection, that you can maybe go deeper as you wish to what James has to say. So I wrestled with these questions, and this is what I came up with. You get to my slide. There will be testing of your faith. Trials. Actually, trials is an external force that comes into you that's trying to pull you away from God. And that can come in many different ways. And so in essence, that's a test. You're being tested. It's not in you, it's external to you coming in. And that I need to persevere to make it so I may be complete, whole, lacking in nothing. Persevere is not a passive term. It's an attentive term that, and some commentators call it militant patience. It's the notion that you have to stand in the tension of what is going on. So it's not a being passive, just sitting back. I need wisdom. There are things I'm not wise about. My experiences, my situations, whatever they are, I'm going to need wisdom from God. God is a generous giver. So he's willing to give abundantly. And here's the kicker. I need to be single-minded in prayer. What does that mean? So in the reading, it talks about not being double-minded. And I was trying to think of an analogy that would all resonate with us, illustrate the difference. And the first one that popped up to my head is driving down Makatil Speedway at a stoplight, and the person in front of me doesn't pull away because they're texting. They're not focused on what they're doing. They're trying to do something else as well. So they're double-minded. That's kind of a cheesy analogy. Here's another one though. This is one though that I don't know if anybody else does this in this room. But last night, as we were preparing for this class, I'm sitting in the family room and Karen's helped, and now she's up going doing other things. And in the meantime, she's telling me stuff. Yeah, yeah. I get up, I'm done, and I turn and I ask her a question, and she immediately turns and says, Phil, I just told you that. So you see how your mind just kind of goes back and forth. And you can get, it's not doubting as we would use the doubt. It's like, but it's the fact that we're not focused our attention.
Well, was that a good thing or a bad?
I'll let her. Yeah. So I'll let you have that discussion with your wife, and I'll have that discussion with my wife. But that's the being, right? So it's the being, or what James wants us to know is not be double-minded when you pray. Right? That's the knowing that James wants us. So now how does James wants it to be? Hold a settled contentment in every situation. Now you say, where's that? That's in the pure joy part. We think of joy as being happy. It's almost, just bubbly or being, as an external emotion. And no, this is what he's talking about in you. So it's to be a settled contentment. Settled means that it's there. It's not wishy-washy about it. It's there. And in doing that, this is really out of that, maintaining a deep, steadfast, and thankful trust in God. That's where the settled contentment comes from. And then, as we talked earlier, we need to be a reflection of God's love to all those he puts in front of me. Now, this gets going to the doing part now. The challenge sometimes that I experience for me personally, especially in the work that I've had, is sometimes I want to forget those first two steps and go right to solving whatever dilemma that I have in front of me. And I get unsettled. I get impatient with being tested. And so what's the doing James wants me to do in this? He wants me to continuously pray for God for wisdom. So that's a mental model of, I guess I'm proposing to you as you think about the scripture as we go through James. Is there a way to kind of process that so that you go, oh, okay, he's speaking to me. Speaking to me. Okay, now some of you were having flashbacks coming back in and seeing pins on the paper, on the table and pins. You mean I have to write stuff? So yes. So Karen's going to hand out, each one take a worksheet. So everyone should get one. Right, we have two sections because we're going to try one as a group and which you can take notes on, and then we're going to try one in our table discussions. Okay. So I'm going to have Karen come back up here, and she's going to read verses 9 through 18. And you can listen. You have the readings in front of you, so you can underline, you do whatever you wish. Helps you learn. What James wants us to know, how James wants us to be, and what James wants us to do as you're hearing the word of James, the wisdom of James. So,
starting in verse 9. Believers in humble circumstances ought to take pride in their high position, but the rich should take pride in their humiliation, since they will pass away like a wild flower. For the sun rises with scorching heat, and withers the plant, its blossom falls out, and its beauty is destroyed. In the same way, the rich will fade away even while they go about their business. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempted. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. When it's full grown, it gives birth to death. Don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly light, who does not change like shifting shadows. Chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created.
So, and you, how about you turn this around and there's the light. So, one thing I wanted to comment on, then I'm going to ask you your responses to what James wants you to know. One of the concepts that he talked about, the differences about being tempted, which is different. So we have testing or trials that you confront. Now he's talking about this notion of being tempted from within. Trials are external, coming at you, trying to pull you away. Now inside you, you might be tempted, and that's within you. So that's the distinction between between trials, being tested, and then being tempted by your heart. To me, one that I've again confronted, you might all been there before. You don't like something, and so I'm tempted to get angry or to lash out. That comes from within me. That doesn't come external. That's kind of the challenge as we kind of try to differentiate between what's being testing us, what's external to us, trying to pull us out, but then what in our own heart we're tempted to have come out. And so James speaks to that here. So with that, as a little more background, what jumps out to you about being these passages? Speak up.
And understand.
Yes.
Ideas like temptation,
Yes.
tempted by your desire. Ideas like rich people, the rich experience humiliation. Conceptual framework.
Yes.
That he's trying to put forward.
And what is he saying about those riches? What does he want you to know about those riches?
That they are of this world and
Yeah.
they are yours. They're part of being double.
Okay. Anything else about riches? Or about, kind of talks about them being destroyed. Temporary, right. They're not, yeah, they will, right. Right. Okay. What does he want you to know about persevering? Yeah, it'd be the crown of life. It's kind of something that, we think of perseverance as all in a negative way. And he's saying, no, in persevering, That's how you receive the crown of life.
Perseverance runs across all three.
Yes, yes,
Something you have, something, it's a way you have to be, something you have to.
yes. So, yes,
Backing up to verse 9, in the humble circumstances. So in other words, whatever your circumstances are,
yeah,
you should be
yeah. Accepting of, yeah, 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 yeah. There you go. Yep. Yep. I mean, that's where we're all in different places. We all have to, this is where it's not a generalized thing. We all have different experiences. Yep. Thank you.
One other thing that he wants us to know is verse 13, that God is not the one supplying the temptation.
Yes. Yes. So God's not tempting. Thank you. What else? Does he want you to know about God?
good and perfect.
Yeah. Good. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So now about, you think about how he now wants you to be, more about not, just thinking of it now, it's kind of in your heart. What's kind of descriptions there? What he says about, what is he? Yeah. Proud in your,
Whatever circumstance.
yes. I think he uses the word there, implies it to weakness. But it's in the trial, whatever circumstance.
Humble circumstances. Pride.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
That could be, yes. What does he say? Yeah, that. Now he does, what does he say about your riches? Be humble. So again, whatever that is, you know, whatever circumstance that is, whatever riches you feel you have, he's saying be humble in them.
So if you know
And with what you believe you bring to the table. Is that, that's how I would thinking about it. Yes, commitment. So, right. So the B is, it goes back to that stable commitment. Yeah. So that's part of that. That's great. And the other here to me, yeah, listening. Yep. Yep. Pardon me.
Quick to listen and slow to speak.
Okay. Okay. Uh,
persevere.
okay. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, be and do. Yeah. So is there any doing? What does he say to do? Keep on keeping. There it is again, persevere. I mean, so far we've got praying and perseverance. Don't be don't be deceived. Don't be deceived. That's listen. Yeah, and so you're having to discern, which requires a level of wisdom and being able to ask and seek that wisdom from God. So far in this chapter, what's the focus been on? It's been on us. So now we're going to read the last section of James, and then we'll let you do this in your tables. So we'll do it in tables, and then we'll kind of call you back at the end. That way it'll allow, so the main objective is to start getting you, as you review, into thinking about the wisdom of James. Okay.
My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourself. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. Whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard and doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. Those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues and their religion. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep them from being polluted by the world.
Okay. There's a lot packed in there. So this is not a test to see what you can get out. This is just a chance for you to respond to what you heard and use the worksheet and to share at your table so you can kind of learn from each other around that passage. And then we'll come back to wrap up. Okay, I'm going to call us back together here. Yeah. Okay, let's get back together. This is good. This is actually a great sign. That's what we were hoping for, is that you'll get into the conversation and do the reflection, and it'll keep going. But we're going to wrap up. The worksheets you can take, they're for you. We'll have others next week here because we're going to go through this process again. So I just want to summarize again what of this came to me. And so you can choose to fill in however you wish. So every Christian will experience trials and testing. It's the nature of being human and accepting our faith in Christ. I need to hold steadfast, persevere, and it needs to be an active patience, not a passive response, so that I may become complete, lacking in nothing, mature, perfect. That's the concept that goes throughout the gospel. I need to ask for wisdom with a focused mind, a single mind, meaning one mind. I put in, I need to live humbly. The caveat there is with whatever riches I perceive I have. I need to resist the temptation of my own desires. I need to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to, and I don't know where my word went. Yeah, you all feel, everybody knows it. Anger. Maybe I didn't want to put that one in, but slow to anger. And then I need to do the Word of God. So we're going to, next time, we're going to come back, especially that last one, and then we're going to move into chapters 2 and 3. I do want to warn you, I'm going to add another level to think about it. And that is that we interact socially on different planes. We act person to person. We act at work or out at school. Even in church, we have different roles and responsibilities. And then we act on a more macro level. For example, on Tuesday, that's an action. That's a doing. And so the reason I want to kind of split those into 3 is so that when we heard Sister Rachel 2 weeks ago here, I can't relate. I have a lot of experience in really, some would say, dark human services. Never as dark as what she experienced in Guatemala City. So that's her doing. It's not my doing. I have other doing. But the wisdom, I told this to Rick. James, her presentation was a reflection of James' wisdom. And this is how she described herself going into Guatemala City during the authoritarian regime in the 1980s, to go and just be a sign of hope and presence of life and prayer. And pray and just be. That's a quote from her. So she even acknowledged then that when she came and knocked on the door and somebody said, the Baptist gave me water and the Methodist built our house, what are you going to give me? That's the doing. And I think she made the point of, the doing can get you off base. So to me, that's this wisdom of James. Thanks for participating. And next week, we'll go on to chapters 2 and 3. Reminder, if there are reference material up here if you want to see them and kind of jot down if you're interested in doing your own research. Yes. Any questions?
And if you're planning to come back, go ahead and take the.
Yes. Yeah. Have a good week. Thank you.
Thank you.